Hello everyone, and welcome to this week of First and 10. I'm your host, Jason Haig. I'm joined as always by my tag team partner, Matt Etchier. Matt, it was kind of a bittersweet week for us in the realm of OUA football as we got to see the explosive Guelph Griffins hit the road to our nation's capital of Ottawa, taking on the Carlton Ravens. But in a way, the sad part is because the Laurier Golden Hawks had their last home game of the season, and unfortunately it was their last home game of the year and game of the season, so that was kind of a bittersweet thing and kind of in a pity party bit of a mood about that. But we started things off on Friday in Ottawa, where these Guelph Griffins, they needed to get a big road win, and that's exactly what they did, Matt.
They sure did, and of course gearing up to Queens, but you can't overlook Carlton. They did get off to a little bit of a slow start. We were kind of staying there on the sideline, a little unsure as to when this Guelph offense was going to pick it up, and they did. Farquharson ran in the first major of the game, but Carlton answered back right away. Dexter Brown throwing a 49-yard pass to Gorjachuk for a touchdown, and it was 10-10 late in the second quarter. But then Guelph woke up. Lindsay ran in his first touchdown of the season, and Graham returned a punt 66 yards for a touchdown. At the half, it was 24-10, and really the Guelph Griffins never looked back. Farquharson ran in another touchdown, and backup quarterback Nangle threw two late touchdowns to Dimitrov and Saxon Lindsay. Guelph took it 48-12 pretty easily.
Pretty much what we expected,
yes.
But in a way what we didn't expect, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, Carlton lost by a kind of a handily fashion. Carlton played some pretty good football, and other than the fact that they're really young, a lot of first-year players, a couple second years, and only a handful of third-year players, this is a team in the future. Give it about 5 years or so. I think it's going to be a real explosive and exciting program because we saw some excitement come out of them. They had a lot of deep balls, some speedy receivers, and some speedy players in general. So Carlton, you're going to be a team to reckon with in the near future.
It's exactly true. And if you look, Guelph's defense allowed 200 rushing yards and over 500 total yards. That's by far the most this season. This Guelph defense just doesn't allow that to happen. So definitely that's an attribute to the Carlton Ravens. You gotta see there that they are definitely an improving team, and they're much better than they were at the beginning of the season. But at the same time, it makes you wonder how much the Guelph Griffins are missing Johnny Rush. Newton, he had 8 tackles on the game, but really there was no other Guelph defenders who had any more than 5 tackles. So kind of all in all, there are some question marks now around this Guelph defense that has been dominant all season, but has struggled the last couple of weeks.
Well, exactly. They faced some strong run attacks. I mean, we obviously saw what Errol Brooks did with York 2 weeks ago, and now what Carlton was able to do. Carlton able to run a lot of misdirection and play action that caught these Griffin defenders off guard, and Guelph's going to really have to tighten that up coming against, one of the top running backs in the OUA for Queens next week, and, you definitely didn't want to overtake or overlook Carlton, and they definitely didn't. I mean, maybe at the start they kind of did, but by the second half they tightened things up. That was the Guelph we were used to seeing, but still, that run defense is going to be something to be tight, and John Rush gone is a huge factor, Matt.
Definitely is. Another player who played well was Jazz Lindsay. He had the least amount of passing attempts, but the highest completion percentage in a game so far. So that kind of shows he's making some good decisions. If maybe he shouldn't be making that throw, he's not. He also had 9 rushes on the game, which is more than in weeks past. So he's doing that. He did still throw another interception. So that's the third game in a row that he's thrown an interception. Got to be a little weary of that. But otherwise, I mean, for the most part, I really liked his decision making.
Yeah, he's improved his decision making. All in all, I mean, we saw a lot more of his legs in this game than more so his arm than we'd had in the previous weeks of the season. But all in all, Guelph's gearing up. They got their guys ready to go offensively. Defense, still now a bit of a question mark, but I think they're going to come to play come next week. But we're going to definitely get into that in a little bit here, Matt.
Yep.
Now, of course, we made the venture to Ottawa for Friday and then woke up really, really early to make the drive back here to the Waterloo region as the Laurier Golden Hawks had their last regular season game of the year, and it was kind of a special one, Matt, because the Golden Hawks were sending off a couple, 5 seniors, I believe. Most notably, they sent off Isaac Dell, Felix Odom, and a couple others, Rashad Latouche, and a couple others. But all in all, it was a nice ceremony to start things, and that's really all you can say, kind of, for Laurier. I mean, they started the game off in the Laurier fashion we'd seen against, the Westerns, the Windsors, and the Queens. Drove down the field. They didn't capitalize with a touchdown, but kicked a field goal. But other than that, not much to say for Laurier, Matt.
Yeah, no, not really. They did strike first with that field goal, but that was pretty much it. Ferguson threw a couple touchdown passes, and running back Wayne Moore ran one in late in the second quarter, 25-3 going in at halftime. But this was the first time Laurier hadn't been leading at half since week 2. So that was a little surprising there. Laurier would fight back in the second half with a few long drives, but they were stopped on the goal line and just couldn't get in for touchdowns, which really would have maybe turned the game around. Final score was 28-5 for McMaster. Definitely not the way Laurier wanted to finish it up.
No, they didn't want to finish it up that way for the season and to send off, so many great players they'd had with only getting 5 points and, giving up 28. That's not what they wanted. The resilience was there from Laurier in the second half, as we've seen all year from this team, but just weren't able to capitalize. McMaster's defense stood strong, protecting that goal line, and that could also be a big confidence booster for McMaster going into the playoff push that they're going on. So McMaster looked strong, but still, Laurier, even though it was only 5 points offensively, their defense was still playing lights out. Actually, for Laurier, they actually were able to win turnover battles and control a lot of the game defensively, I felt, and it just couldn't capitalize with the offense this week.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, they just couldn't get those majors, but their defense did play very well. Limited a great quarterback, Ferguson, to 197 passing yards, which is incredible considering he's averaging over 300 yards per game. Also, they had 2 sacks, an interception, and a fumble recovery, which is great against the MAC offense. They don't really, as you said, they don't really turn the ball over that often, so that's the way that went.
Exactly. And after the game, Matt, we caught up with Coach Michael Falls to talk about the game that had happened.
MAC executed, and they're a good football team, so they came in 3-3, but we know they're a better football team than a 500 team, and they showed that today. Our guys battled hard. They played well. We had 3 drives that ended up going for it on third down inside their 5-yard line, and we just couldn't punch it in. I really would have liked to send our seniors out with a win, but Isaac Dell and Felix Odom, Rashad Latouche, and Tommy Griffiths, we're proud of those guys.
Well, there was Falls. You could just see he was, a little upset just how the seniors get sent off, but I think he was still kind of proud of how his team played against another top school in McMaster.
Yeah.
And, speaking of the seniors being sent off, we caught up with 2 seniors that now are no longer Golden Hawks. That was Isaac Dell and Felix Odom. Now, we spoke with Isaac Dell about his career in the OUA.
But it really hasn't sunk in yet that it's over. I mean, obviously I enjoyed the 5 years. I wouldn't have kept coming back each year if I didn't enjoy it. But kind of speechless, really. It hasn't hit me yet because this is the same process every year. So I think it might hit me maybe later next week kind of thing. But it's definitely been a crazy ride, and I have no regrets with it.
There's Dell talking about his OUA career, and you can tell there's a lot of fond memories and moments, and he's going to look back on this and going to be a good building factor for not just his football future, but his life future, Matt.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what football is all about, and that's the way it works. Same thing with Felix Odom. He had 4.5 tackles on the day. As you said, we caught up with him, and this is what he said about his fondest memories.
Right. Homecoming. It has to be the homecoming every year, because I was telling the guys, the older you get, the more you appreciate homecoming. Because a lot of the guys that you grew up with, learned with, they leave, but they always come back. And the atmosphere here at Laurier, I mean, you guys know, it's like a huge family. So homecoming's always special every year. Something I look forward to now that I can do.
Well, there was Felix talking about his favorite memories, and some of these guys being gone, it's going to be kind of sad because Dell and Odom all year has been fantastic. Dell the past couple weeks had stepped up, but it's going to be sad not seeing them in the Golden Hawk colors. But Matt, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to have our Player of the Week segment. So stay with us, folks. Welcome back to First and 10, and Matt, It's our Player of the Week segment, and normally we got a wide variety of selection here, but this week it was kind of a two-race pony. Both players from the Guelph Griffins. It could have been either Saxon Lindsay or the player we chose, Rob Farquharson, the Guelph Griffins running back. I mean, a fantastic day on the field for him. He had the ball 12 times, picked up 122 yards, scored 2 touchdowns, but most importantly to me, basically a first down every time he touched the ball, man. So a great day for Rob.
Yeah, 10.2 yards per carry. That's incredible for any kind of running back. Like you said, he touches the ball, that means it's a first down. What a great day by him. Really, what he did for them in this game is he started out the scoring in this game, and they handed him the ball, and they kind of had a bit of a slow start, and he just drove down the field and on a big run there and got their first major of the game and really got that offense rolling for them. He's only played 3 games in the OUAJ, but he has the most yards per carry, the most yards per game, 123 yards per game. But probably the biggest thing, he has 5 touchdowns in 3 games. That's absolutely incredible. If he had played all 8 games of this season, I can only imagine how successful he would be running the ball right now. Last season, he obviously played all 8 games, had 8 touchdowns total, and averaged 118 yards per game. So just improving from last year and getting rolling, and he's getting hot just in time for playoffs.
He's getting hot just as the weather outside is getting cooler. After the game, we did catch up with Guelph Griffin head coach Stu Lang, and here's what he had to say about Rob Farquharson's performance last week against Carlton.
Rob is amazing. He's really only played 3 games, but all 3 games have been over 100 yards. We took him out because obviously we're getting into what now we call our playoffs. But just a phenomenal guy. He never gets stopped. Those legs just keep going.
Well, there's Coach Lang talking about Rob Farquharson. You know how much he and the rest of the team really rely and just love what Rob does for the team. There he said they took him out of the game because they're getting into playoff gear, which, you know what, I'm totally okay with that decision, definitely. Because the game against Carlton, I mean, you wanted the win, you were totally in control. May as well get some of the guys out of there.
Don't want to risk injury.
Yeah, don't want to risk injury, especially for Farquharson, because you know you're going to need him. The one thing with Farquharson before we move on here, Matt, I have noticed is, in this game against Carlton, he fumbled the football. Now, that's something we haven't seen much of him in most of his career. But ever since he did that, it seemed like he was running harder, more determined to make plays, more determined to find holes, and just turn it on, and that's exactly what he did. So, as you said, he's getting hot at the right time. If I'm Queens, I'd be a little worried about seeing that man coming down the field at my defense.
Definitely, and and we always talk about him being a leader, and last week he was our player of the week as well, and we spoke about him after touchdown going over and thanking his offensive line. Now this week, we noticed he fumbled the ball, and he just gets even more motivated to not only not fumble the ball again, but play even harder. He is a true leader by example, and that any coach would want, and as you mentioned, no opponent wants to play against, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely not. They don't want to see that little ball of muscle and destruction coming at there. I mean, he's got an axe and a smasher, and they're called his legs and his head, so
that's right.
You don't want to see that. So Rob Farquharson, though, our player of the week for the second week in a row, so congrats, Rob. Finishing up, though, the rest of the abbreviated week here in the OUA, it was a short week. In Toronto, we had the blue and red game, and the Toronto Varsity Blues were able to make the York Lions black and blue with a 56-35 victory over York. And then in Waterloo, it was the Queen's Gales galloping all over the Waterloo Warriors with the score 78-21. I mean, for Waterloo, I understand they're still kind of rebuilding the program, taking on one of the best schools in Canada, but for the second time this season, they've given up 78 points. A concern when you're giving up 78 points and it's not on the hardwood but on the gridiron. I'm really worried about you, Waterloo. I'm really, really worried.
Yeah, definitely. As you kind of alluded to there, week 1, of course, they lost just like this against Windsor. Moving on to the league standings here, Guelph and Western at the top there with both 7-0. Queens sitting there in 3rd place at 6-1. McMaster, Ottawa, and Windsor all tied in 4th at 4-3. They're finishing off the playoffs there. And then 7th was Toronto, obviously with that big win over York. York in 8th, Waterloo 9th. Laurier finishing the season 1-7, and they're in 10th currently, and then Carlton in 11th.
Yeah, and then moving on to my power rankings here, not too much of a difference from what Matt had last week. We have Western, Guelph, Queens, McMaster, Windsor all in the top 5. Ottawa's just outside the top 5 at 6. Toronto moves up with their victory over York. Laurier goes down a spot after the loss to McMaster, and then finishing out the bottom here, you got the York Lions, Waterloo, and the Carlton Ravens.
And then the CIS top 10 to finish everything off. Not a lot of changes just because not a lot of people played because of Thanksgiving going on. Western still number 1, Laval still number 2, Calgary still number 3. Some of the other OUA teams in the top 10, Guelph still in 4th, Queens in 5th, McMaster 9th, and Windsor in 10th.
Yeah, Windsor in 10th. I mean, you know, the OUA, not a lot of guys really played, but still, you got to let the viewers out there know just how well the OUA is doing here in the CIS top 10. But Matt, we're going to take a quick break, and we got some dandies to preview for you this week. So you definitely don't want to miss this one, so stay with us. Welcome back to First and 10, and Matt, it's the last week of the regular season, the last real week of big Guelph game previews that we're fully aware of here. And it couldn't be any better because this game this week is absolutely going to be it's for obviously much more than just a win.
Yeah.
There's a lot more on the line. There's a lot of history between these two teams.
Tons.
It's what sports is all about, if you don't mind me saying. I mean, Shakespeare himself could write a play on the history and the intrigue of this game. It's the Guelph Griffins heading up to Kingston, take on the Queens Gales, the 7-0 Griffins, the 6-1 Gales. These teams don't like each other. No. Queens has lost last year to them not once, but twice. A rematch of the semifinals. Good golly, Miss Molly. I mean, this is just a big game, Matt. More than anything.
Oh my God, is ever. And to make it even bigger, this is Queen's second homecoming, I guess?
Yeah, I mean...
I guess when you miss 5 homecomings, you get 2, or the first year that you have them back. As you mentioned, rematch of last year's semifinals. And folks, if you don't remember, Guelph was down 36-14 in this game, going into the 4th quarter, and they came back and won it in overtime, 42-39. So you know both these teams had this game circled, and not only both these teams, everyone who is an OUA fan was looking forward to this game in week 9 of this season, and the winner gets the bye. So whoever wins this game, they're going to get a first round bye and then host a game to get into the semifinals of the Yates Cup. How exciting is that?
It really, like I said, sports doesn't get any better than this. There's so much on the line. Before we get into more of the preview, after the game last week, we have already said, we spoke with Coach Lang about this game, and here's what he had to say.
Well, it's for all the marbles in terms of the season. Obviously, getting home field advantage is really, really important for us. But Queens is tough. They've got a great defense. They're well coached. And for the first time since I've been coaching, we're playing there on grass. So it's to their favor.
Well, you can tell Coach Lang is already getting himself and the team mentally prepared, you know, as he finished the 4th quarter out with basically a bunch of the second strings. Like we said, we have no problem with that. Smart strategy. You got to have your best ready and ready to be the best, especially against this Queens team who, let's face it, folks, they are a really good team. And as we've mentioned in the CIS rankings, Queens is also a spot below Guelph, so that's also got to hurt them.
Yeah.
Now, when we saw Queens take on Laurier, they are an explosive team. They have potential. They got one of the best running backs in all of Canada. They have some top receivers. But Laurier was able to exploit them in many ways. They were able to get a strong pass rush on Billy McPhee, able to shut him down. He wasn't really a big benefactor in there, and that's what was able to keep Laurier in that game. Guelph, as we've said all year, has a great defense, but the lack of John Rush here, Matt, it could be never more prevalent than in this game.
Yeah, we've kind of alluded to it throughout the show, but as you mentioned, Queens, second best rushing team in the OUA right now, and Guelph is the best rush defense still, even though they kind of struggled the last last couple weeks, but this is definitely going to be the toughest offense that Guelph has faced all season, and they have to be ready for it with or without, well, it's definitely going to be without Johnny Rush, but yeah, so they're going to have to prepare all week in practice for these guys. And as we were mentioning, kind of stumbling into this in terms of their defense, Guelph has given up over 200 rushing yards in the past 2 games, very unlike their defense. But of course, where your defense is struggling, you can always have your offense pick you up, right, Jay?
Exactly, and you know what? This Guelph offense has done that really all year. They've picked themselves up in many a situation, whether it be having some stutters in week 2 against Windsor, to have the drive to send it to 2-0, and then, you know, if they faced any adversity, well, they'd have some big drives of their own right in clutch games such as their homecoming game against McMaster. So as well, I mean, this is just a real big game here. The only worry I have offensively is while Jazz started out the season fantastic, only had 1 interception up until I believe week 5.
That's right.
Which was the pick 6 that Felix Odom returned. He's kind of turned the ball over a little too many times. He had 4 interceptions against Waterloo, and then 1 against York, and 1 last week against Carlton. He's gonna, as we said, he's made some smarter decisions. He's been able to read routes a little better with his receivers, but you don't want to have a turnover here because of how much is on the line, and this Queens offense will make you pay more so than the other teams they've faced recently, Matt.
They sure will, exactly. Those teams you mentioned, not necessarily the biggest defensive teams that you're going to face this year. And as you said, last 3 games, he's thrown 6 interceptions. That's really big. Now, so lucky for him, though, Queens, they will capitalize on it, but they really only have 3 interceptions all season long. But they have 32 sacks, which means they are going to bring that pass rush against them. Now, how does Guelph combat this? Obviously, you get the ball out of your hands really quick. You have that running game. But really, I think it's going to come down to Jazz Lindsay himself, and he's going to have to be able to use his feet, get out of the pocket, and make the Queens defensive line really be honest and not try to collapse the pocket too much. Otherwise, he's going to bring the hurt. And also, Guelph's receivers really need to step up in this game. Queens have allowed 15 passing touchdowns this season, which is a lot. And so, I mean, we've seen Guelph receivers get open between the 20s. We need to see them get open in the end zones and put up some points against this Queens defense.
I think it's something that's going to happen. I mean, Saxon's playing some of the best football of his career right now. Alex Charette has also been a big threat. And then you have the likes of Dylan Dimitrov, who's, you know, he almost took a big, deep ball back against the Ravens last week. So, I mean, the receivers are looking pretty ready. The running backs in Farquharson, and if Augustine even comes in, are ready. Jazz is ready. I think Guelph's ready. I think Guelph is ready to king Queens, if you don't mind me saying, Matt.
I agree with you for sure there, and it's going to be fun going down there to Kingston and watching them in Kingston. That's the other thing. This is probably the toughest road game that they're going to play all season as well, so we're going to see how this goes.
Exactly. The other benefactor, before we move on here, Matt, is the field conditions in Queens. Guelph has not been on a field like this at all. I mean, you wouldn't. Grass, you wouldn't think it'd be that bit of a benefactor for Queens, but it really is. It's just a different atmosphere since they've been playing on that turf style. But Guelph, I think they're ready. I think they're ready to, as I said, king Queens in Kingston. And then moving on to our game to watch, a feature here since we don't have a Laurier game, a little bit of another important game here as the season winds down. It's the Windsor Lancers heading to the nation's capital to take on the Ottawa GGs. Matt, this one has a lot of intrigue in it as well.
It does. And really the reason why this one's, I think the Guelph Queens game is truly the game to watch. But this one, as you said, a lot of intrigue in it. And it's just because both of these teams, now they have both beat Toronto, U of T, so they have clinched the playoffs. But if Windsor wins, they have an opportunity to possibly best McMaster in the standings. It would come down to a tiebreaker and basically points differential. So we'll see how that works out. But even just on its own, these two teams, very explosive offenses. Both teams averaging over 300 passing yards per game. Two of the top 5 quarterbacks in the OUA. Aaron Colbon, 2,215 yards, 18 passing touchdowns, and then obviously Austin Kennedy, 1,706 yards on the season, 15 touchdowns. It's just going to be a fun game to watch all around. And then Windsor also sporting 2 of the top tacklers in the CISJ. Linebackers Renault and Wander, here. They have 45 tackles each, so they're going to be looking to tackle this Ottawa team.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's the one thing that I lean with Windsor, because both teams are explosive when it comes to the offense. There's no doubt about that. But I think Ottawa's defense lacks, and I think that's where Windsor will capitalize, especially as Windsor is also kind of like Ottawa in the fact that they have a lot of veterans and guys knowing each other. But I think the lack of an Ottawa defense is going to be a real hindrance for the GGs.
All right, there
and
you
then
go.
quickly moving on to our quick pick segment, Matt, just to round out the year here in the OUA. Hard to believe. McMaster heads up to Ottawa as well to take on Carlton. Who you like?
I gotta go with McMaster.
Yeah, you got to go with Mac in this one. Waterloo Warriors, Toronto Varsity Blues.
UT.
Yeah, the Warriors should sing the Blues, and the York Lions and the Western Mustangs in London.
This one might be closer than you'd think, because Western's kind of got it wrapped up, but I gotta go with Western.
I cannot pick against Western until someone does. But if you have any questions, folks, you can definitely get at us at our Twitter. That's at First and 10FB. For Matt, I'm your host, Jason Hagholm. Peace out, and definitely enjoy some good football.